Today's episode is sponsored by Dance of Gamers. Dance of Gamers is the leading distributor of video games and other consumer gadgets like the podcast microphone sets, ring lights, headphones, and affordable smartwatches, and many other cool gadgets. For these and more, visit their website at www.danceofgamers.co. That is www.danceofgamers.co. Before we go into today's episode, I just wanted to pass out a disclaimer about today's video. In today's video, when I recorded it, my guest didn't have good Wi-Fi signal. So for those of you that are watching on YouTube, there's some parts in the video where his picture is not good or his video is not good, but the audio is pretty good throughout, so that shouldn't be a problem. As many of you know, I try to do quality work because I want to produce quality work for the listeners, and I try to challenge myself to be better all the time. So I apologize to those of you that are going to watch on YouTube and don't really like the quality. The audio should be perfect for those of you who are watching on Spotify. I try to get better. But one thing I know, that my podcast being remote, when I host people from different countries, different parts of the world, they might not have a good internet signal. Once in a while during our interview, Wi-Fi might go off, go on. So bear with me on this one. And I apologize. There's some things I can control and there's some things I can't control. But thanks for your support and your love, and continue supporting the Ugandan Boy Talk Show. Let's go into today's episode with Uganda's legend, hip-hop legend, Babaluku. Mujevale, Mujevale, Mujevale. My name is Bani Kibuka, and welcome to another episode of the Ugandan Boy Talk Show. Yeah, we're clear. We're clear and we're rolling right now. So what's up?
Just like that.
Just like that. Just like that. It doesn't take long. For a second I thought, I was like, man, what happened? I don't know. Because I thought
Mm,
we answered on like 4 p.m. So I was in here. It was like 8 a.m. in the US. So I woke up on
yeah,
here. But I didn't see you. I was like, oh my gosh, what's up?
yeah. I got a weird phone that's doing weird things, so I was lucky that I really wanted to turn it on, and so I was like, "Oh God, like it's already 4:30," you know?
Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited to have you. I've always wanted to have you on the podcast for a very long time, ever since I started this. Because you're one of the people that I know I've just met you just like quick few hours, and we're gonna talk about that. But the moment that I spent with you for those few hours, it just like switched my brains until today. Like it's stuck in there, and I wanted to sit down and have a conversation with you, and on top of what you do and all that. We're gonna talk about that today. So I'm glad that we're able to make this happen today.
Oh, it's a pleasure, man. You know that flight made sense. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I didn't say where I met you. I wanted to just bring it in, but I'm glad you remembered it was on a flight. And I have it on my notes here. Was back in 2015 on a flight
Mm,
from Amsterdam to, actually,
yeah,
we might have been on the same flight from Uganda. Just maybe I just didn't see you, but
yeah. We
remember.
made it in transit in Amsterdam, and
Mhm.
so we knew we were heading in the same direction after that before we parted ways.
I remember sitting right behind you and Daniel, and you guys were
Mm,
talking, and I'm like, I think I know this guy. I think I know this guy. And I still remember the conversation we had, because that was, like I was saying, like even though it was a short period of time, it stayed in me like till today, and I wanted to bring that out to other people that we talked about. I remember telling you my story. I wanted to
mm,
go on aviation to work on airplanes, and we didn't really
yeah,
have a lot of people who do that. And I didn't know what the dream is looking like at that time. But you just
mm,
empowered me, like, Bonnie, just go do this. You're gonna do it, and you followed me, my footsteps. You followed, no, not my footsteps, but you followed my journey to follow up.
yeah.
And every achievement I've done, you pop up on my Instagram, drop a comment like, Bonnie, I'm proud of you. Thank you. You're doing great. And that's it with me.
Yeah, man. I mean, like you are in a place where you are really aspiring to do a lot of big things, and as a dreamer, I really appreciate young men or young women who dare to dream big.
Yeah.
Here we're meeting, you're like, yeah, I'm going to be a pilot. I'm just forget being a pilot. I'm going to operate on planes. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, it's possible. Why not? Like all the way from God knows where in Kampala, you are
Yeah.
headed to, the Americas to, pursue this dream. So I was just like, yo, like these are some of the young futures that we're going to be a part of. So I was actually honored to meet you along the way. Because,
Yes.
as my work with Bavubuka, these are the dreamers' land. You know what I'm saying? We want people to dream. We want our young people to have imaginations of something different. You
Mhm.
go from imagining just having a Rolex stand to wanting to be a pilot. You know what I'm saying?
And I'm glad you mentioned the Bavubuka because you gave me a card, your a business card, and I was planning to bring it on the podcast, but it's in my wallet like till today. It's in there with your contact number, and you gave it to me after the flight. And I've followed you ever since then. You've connected me with some young people that I've had the same dream I've had on WhatsApp. Like, hey,
Mm.
Bonnie, talk to this person. They really want to do this dream, and you've tried to open doors for other people. And even mentioning your own foundation, the Bavubuka, which we're going to talk about later. You trying to bring us the youth creatives in whatever you do, not only music. You're a legend in music, which we're going to touch about later, but not only music, you try to go in all different creative to bring us up and motivate us. And I'm really, really happy you're doing this. And for all the youth back in Uganda, even us in the diaspora, I appreciate the work you do for us and empowering us. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you for having me. Finally, I made it in the seat. You know.
Yeah. So one of the caption, and like I've said, I've followed you and I still follow you on Instagram, the work you do, the everything
Mm.
that you do, and some of the things are thoughtful that you do, you talk about when you get a mic, not even in your music, even in just talking poems, like it's thoughtful. And you have these three things that are gonna be the what we're talking about today. There's one, not three, like a lot, but there's a caption you have on one of your Instagram that says the people, the journey, the stories, the lessons, and the impact. And for the
Mm.
few minutes we've been on the podcast, I think from my story, we've touched on all these things just by just talking. The people we met, the journey we met on the journey to go to the US, and you following my journey, and the stories sharing you my story, the lessons I've learned from you, and the impact you've done in my life. So throughout these podcasts, we're gonna be touching, and they'll come up once in a while. And I've already talked about empowering young creatives. When did you come up
Mm.
with this idea? Like, I want to go out and help the youth.
Yeah, I think for me that ties me to my upbringing, starting from my grandfather, then going on to my father. They were all community orientated, and they cared about the neighborhoods they lived in. They use their platforms always to be a voice and to be a gap, to bridge a gap between whatever disparities were in the community. Like they were those people who, like, the whole entire community will come to when there was a need or when there was a problem. So growing up in a household like that, I can't say that I started understanding what the work would be, but I've had examples that in the future would make sense to what I was doing.
Mhm.
My heart to want to reach out to young people started in church. You know what I mean? I'm a preacher's son.
Nice.
So service was always a thing. You know what I'm saying? That's not new. So when you're a preacher's kid, the service is what is.
Facts. Yeah.
So I always gathered young people when I was younger. I always wanted to create an experience for all of us. So if I had access to something, I would invite like a bunch of friends and be like, "Yo, guys, we have this. You want to come and check it out?" So there were always people coming to my house for some experience. And so as young people, when you have a friend like that, you always like to hang around him. You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying?
Yeah.
So literally, man, growing up in Makindye and being a preacher's kid and being around ministry life for a long time, I
Mm-hmm.
have to say there's no way I would have escaped the
Yes.
spirit of service or the spirit of community
Yeah.
and the spirit of healing. Because I think for me, that's those three I just mentioned. It's what brings me to who I have become today. You know, a lot of people
Mhm.
want to talk about me as an artist, but you can know that I don't really talk about myself or my music.
For the time I've seen you, like even before we met on that flight, I had listened to your music. I had friends that really were like you were the role model, and I can't sing, but my friends used to sing like the Lugaflow, and they looked up to you. And I had your name, seeing you on TV, your music, and every time I see you, you're with somebody, you're around people, you're not selfish, you're selfless. Like you're a living example of somebody who is selfless. Like it's not about you, it's about other people that are around you to benefit from who you are. And it's good we talk about music because you talked about how we know you through music, and that's how we come up with these things. And
Mm.
I listened to your music growing up, and recently I went back to your album, and I want to focus on. You have a lot of songs. Which,
Mm.
if we sit down to discuss all the songs, we're gonna spend the rest of the hour talking about music here. But I'm gonna focus on the Lugaflow Revolution back in
Yeah.
2009. That was the album you released in 2009, and there's a few songs there that I want to put my focus on because
Mm.
as young kids, I would say as young kids, and recently, few years, these 2 years, we talk about struggle a lot. We talk about the struggle in Uganda. But back in
Mm.
2009, there was a guy singing about this struggle before these 2 years we know about struggle. And with on the album, the Bataka Squad, first of all, you start with the song Kampala. And I listened to the song Kampala, and I was like, that if it doesn't describe a kid from Kampala, I don't know what describes a kid from Kampala. And that was, I don't know if any of our listeners, yeah, actually, if you're listening on this podcast right now, you can even pause this and just go and check out that song Kampala. Listen to it. And if you're a kid who grew up in Kampala, it describes your life. It described my life. What were you thinking when
Mm.
you wrote the song Kampala? And
I mean, you use the word describe, and I'm not going to take it far from that. You know, growing up in Canada and coming home and revisiting Kampala, I think the whole entire Lugaflow revolution
yeah,
was really me capturing the new Kampala I had returned to, what I found in Uganda after being away for 12 years, you
mhm,
know? And so because of that, I was able to start like capturing image through writing,
yeah,
like imagination, like, you know, the kind of Kampala I was grasping on my return to paint a picture that would be like, this is who we are in the spaces. And this is how people move. This is what they do.
mhm,
This is how they eat. This is how they walk. This is the hustle. You know,
yeah,
whether you're in an urban space, you're in the village, you're downtown or you're uptown, you know,
mhm,
everyone has a chance to be, you know, given an opportunity to be represented, you know. And
yeah.
I actually listened to those songs. I'm like, man, where was I sitting? Like, you know, to
Exactly.
capture all of that.
Exactly, and that was in my mind too when I was listening to the songs. Like, where, what? Because you think about us right now, like 2000, 2002, 2021, no, 2022, 2021. We're talking about, oh my God, struggle, and it sounds like something that just happened, but it was there in 2009. 2009, I was in senior three, I think, in high school. And right now, I'm finished with college, I'm finished with everything. But like listening to that, and it's literally the same thing that's happening. And in line with that, there's another song, Tukoye Mbele No. That's another song.
That's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Uh, I have to tell you that that song for me describes so much of where we've come from
Hmm.
and where our people are stranded and how they're thinking about possibilities that are not yet even on the table after all the prayers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Hmm.
So to call it as the title itself, we're tired, we're fed up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I was in Kampala where I was not only working in the ghettos, but I was also dealing with mothers in marketplaces. I was going to villages and visiting the elderly. I was open to so much struggle and disparities that were in every space I went to. And it felt like no one was doing a thing, you know, and no
Yeah.
one was speaking out, and no one had the ability in that time, because we're talking about like 12, 13 years ago of this
Yeah.
written piece.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? In that time, no one was bold enough to dare
Yeah.
question that narrative, you know?
Exactly.
And you know
Yeah.
what was funny? When this whole people power thing happened, I went back to that song and I was like, man, God knows we captured this times way before time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
For
you know,
real.
yeah, my mom always say that, you know, you got a prophetic ministry, you know what I'm saying? And so for me, the Lugaflow Revolution is probably like a prophecy of captured presents, past, and futures
Yeah.
that we hadn't evolved our minds to, but there were responsibilities to come that we need to pay attention to, you know? And when people talk about hip hop albums in Uganda, I tell them I only did that compilation. But within that compilation, for me, it becomes one of the masterpieces that I don't think anyone in this hip hop sphere has captured community representation at that level to the present. That piece literally bears a spirit of healing that's different, a
Yeah.
spirit of advocacy that comes from a place that I don't even know where I was suffering from to be able to tune into that space. But most importantly, in my life, the biggest testimonials of a generation that I've inspired. Everyone has a song on that album that spoke or changed their life or pivoted them into thinking they could do greater things. There's a brother, I'm forgetting his name, but he's now living in Denmark, and he had an IT scholarship that he got. But he told me he used to ride his bike listening to Ochali War,
Yeah.
you know, and he used to tell me that, listen, I used to ride my bike to go to Nile breweries in Ginger so I could make money to pay for my tuition. And I would come by Bavubuka, but I never wanted to tell you my real story and my real struggle. I just enjoy the happiness of welcoming us always. And he said, but I promise if something good happened to my life, I will tell you the full story.
Yeah.
So soon later, when he got his scholarship to go to Sweden to do IT, he literally called me and wrote a whole blog about his story
Yeah.
on how his dad was blind, on how the first white person who went to his community showed him a computer and he fell in love with computers. Well, now he wanted to go to school, but no one could pay school for him. So he had to go farm in a school farm to be able to be allowed to go to school. And then finally
Wow.
he was looking for a job. So, like I say, it's important. Like I always say that the reason I didn't focus on being a pop artist or a commercial artist, there was so much healing to do in the community with my peers that it attracted me to the bottom end of the story.
Yeah.
You
I'm
know?
glad you shared that story. Because at the beginning of this podcast, I shared a little bit of my story, and for the listeners that caught up on that. And I want to add on to that testimony you just said, because when you were sharing with me at that time, I was actually just going to school. I didn't know what was going to happen in the period of time. But a lot happened in the period of time when I met you till today. Like, no, till I finished the school, till I went to the pilot school, I did my aviation and graduated. And tapping onto, there's a song on the album. I know it's a remix. I know you did with Benon and Vampers. And the chorus of the song say, I know that I will win no matter what comes my way. Like something like that. And like for me, no matter the struggles I was going through at that time, like that line right there, and then your rap that comes on after that, you just adding on to that line, like just adding on to it, like, hey, you have the chorus now, just listen to this um part, yeah, your part, like your rap, and just emphasizing on that. And that reminds me that I'm gonna win no matter comes my way. And I actually did. Like I know I'm still, like, life is a journey, you just keep going, but that was just reminding me of that. Like no matter what comes your way, just keep going, you're gonna win. And I graduated, I now work on airplanes, and it's a dream that I've always had. And like that that album right there, and I'm sure there's a lot
Yeah.
of million stories out there that people can come to you and say, "Hey, this is what this song did to me," and it's amazing. And I'm glad God used you to sing these things to empower our lives. Like, and what you just said, like, it's a prophecy of these times, and it's actually is, because if you listen to all those songs on the album, they testify that.
Man, like following you guys and your achievements was always my inspiration. And people don't actually understand that we're called Bavubuka because I was inspired by the youth who were doing good. Because
Mhm.
they gave me hope to think that this country will be better because they were willing to choose to do good, versus that embrace the struggle. This organization could have easily been Babaluku Foundation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was those young people. You know what I'm saying? They had a sense of we will. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And we are waiting, but I pivoted in to say let's not wait, let's act now.
Mhm.
And let's start believing in ourselves. Let's occupy spaces where they don't want to see us. Let's take ourselves in all those places they have blocked us out of.
Yeah.
And I think that you guys are a representation of what inspired me to find my way back home. So it's always a mutual exchange.
Yeah.
It's never been about, oh, I figured out some genius avenue. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
it's like when I look you all in the eyes, when you told me the stories, I would sit with them and then I'll be like, like when I met you on a flight, I could not stop thinking about how far you were going to go.
Yeah.
And I remember I was with another young man on our flight. I was with Gilbert.
Yeah.
We were going to DC, you
Uh-huh.
know?
Yeah.
And I think after that flight, we kept talking about you because we were just so happy to meet another young person who was on a
Yeah.
journey. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's
It's
funny.
that.
He just texted me too, like a few weeks ago, because he still has my number, and we've been in touch ever since then. And I'm glad we kept all these contacts, like till today. He checks up on me. He's like, "Hey, how you doing? How's life going?" And he follows all the work that I
The
do.
love is the same. We're trying to show Uganda that we can live different. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? We can build different. I said, I'm trying to make sure that, we continue to live this life and show others that
yeah.
we definitely can build and we can connect and we can have these friendships, to bring
Yeah.
us together.
I know most of the people who know you, they know a little bit about your journey and your journey into music. But just can you just walk us through just a little bit of how you tapped into this music? I know I don't know the story. Maybe I wasn't
Mm.
there when you started the music, but how was your journey into music when you started?
My journey into the music, born and raised in Makindye, you know what I'm saying? And being raised in Makindye as a young kid, I think, and being around church, inspired me a lot. You know what I'm saying? It put me in a lot of good places to be musical, know about, instruments. But also, I saw my dad every day recording a band in a living room because my dad was actually one of the pioneers of those Christian bands.
Yeah,
They were the first people to make Christian cassette tapes of like Christian bands.
yeah,
He had a store in town where they distributed, even were the first distributors. And so being around that environment, and being young, you never know what's gonna pick up in your mind. But I love the idea that I was always around artists, and they were teaching us a thing or two, but then they became our role models. Like we wanted to become them. Like if you saw someone playing the jazz, like I want to sit on the jazz and play the jazz. If you
mhm,
saw someone playing the keys, you wanted to play the keys. So
mhm,
it gave us the opportunity to really move towards like, being musically inclined and without our dad telling me like, oh, you got to be this or you got to be that. None of that. I
right,
just always saw the people who came around and I would just pick a thing or two from here, pick a thing or two from there. And in later in life, I always say when I got into hip hop, it just allowed me to have a different discipline.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
even the reason I don't make curse music, I always tell people, it's like when I'm writing, I had to make sure my mom is actually checking everything I was writing
That is
to
actually
ensure.
true. It's something I've noticed in your songs. Like you never hear that in any of your songs.
So, I always say that when I got into writing and when I understood what hip hop was for me, because at an early age, I got into hip hop when I was in Makindye. My uncle, R.I.P., Tom Bantubalamu, he used to do raps in church. and he used to dance in church. And he was like my role model growing up. I said, yeah, I'm going to either dance with my uncle or be around his musical energy, you know. But, you know, he transitioned at a pinnacle where my father was high in the country, and he was the head of the music department, and they were really doing good as far as ministry was concerned. But me then growing up in Canada, right, is kind of like allowed me to really understand the rap culture and what it really was. It allowed me to understand the Black struggle from a different lens. Single mother raising you in a foreign land. Like many stories started coming up, you know? And it's how I got into hip hop. You know what I'm saying? Because hip hop, listening to college radios, and I was in high school at the time, you know, is where I found messages and stories that related to what I was going through. And that led me to fall in love with hip hop culture. As far as hip hop is concerned, as far as rap, ever since I was 7, 8, 9, I enjoyed like rap through VHS tapes that were playing in the Bidandali. My uncle used to have a friend who had a Chidandali, so they'll give us the music section, not the films, but the music section. You know how they always play music before the film, you know?
Yeah.
So he used to bring us the music tapes, and then we'll see the MC Hammers, the Vanilla Ice, the Grandmaster Flash, like "Don't Push Me, 'Cause I'm close to the age," all of that stuff. And so I was like, "Whoa, it's really cool," but I never really understood it until I migrated to Canada. That's when I made sense of hip hop culture versus rap culture, you know, and that hip hop for me changed my whole entire life. I would not be in Uganda today if it wasn't hip hop. We wouldn't have met if it wasn't hip hop. So I always try to testify that because of this beautiful culture, I was able to tap into my identity and fall in love with reconnection. So it guided me back home. And so that's why when I'm home, whatever we do, hip hop will always be a part of the spirit in which we are building.
Yeah. And that's a good journey. And I touched on two things that I want to talk about. You mentioned, and I interrupted you when you're talking, like you never hear those curse words in your songs. Never in your songs. Like your songs are straight to the point, emphasizing something that's going to be impactful in another person's life. And that's you never see that in like these days. People want to do hip hop, and they know like, once they pull the two curse words, that's what they're gonna do. And the other thing is like you never hear Babaluku's name in any scandal. Like he's discipline. You mentioned about discipline, behavior. Like you hold yourself with this. I don't know how to describe it, but like you never hear your name anywhere. It's just on good causes. That's why you hear Babaluku's name. How have you managed to do that?
I mean, like, you know, there's no hip hop without beef.
Yeah.
And I think I just chose the healthy kind of beef, and it only could translate into positive vibrations. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if I was fighting someone over a voice or a statement, it was always it was always in a place that can we really talk about it and get to the depth of it so we could all learn from it. So sooner or later, when you grow, you're like, oh, actually, that was relevant. We really needed to talk about that.
Right.
You know, so I think like there was a huge there was like 4 to 5 years when there was beef between me, you know, with clear cut over should we rap in our native languages. And it's not necessarily that they were against it or that I was against them, but it was the idea that for the first time someone was loudly saying you should rap in your language, like stop all of that other stuff, like let's all rap in our languages. You know, it became like it was like I'm forcing everyone now, right? It came up like I was trying to force everybody. But I literally always say I was only standing in a place where minorities were, and I had to be so loud so everyone could awaken to knowing that our languages were hip and that we needed to focus on giving them first priority versus than the colonial languages. You know what I'm saying? And when we did that Lugaflow thing, that was the gift we were bringing to the culture. And I always tell people today, I say sometimes, you know, we have to reflect and understand that if we didn't do Lugaflow, no one would be, you know, promoting the language today.
I actually remember that beef you're talking about with Clear Cut. It was all over TV and everybody. And there was also another beef that just came up. I don't know who. It was like a few years ago too. Anya singer, something like that. It was, I don't know if you remember that, where like a lot of
Eh,
like hip hop
is
Anya
it
sing,
who is who?
who
Something
is
who is
who?
who?
Yeah, who is who? Where were you on that one?
That was an interesting saga. I think I ended up on NBS 5, and they wanted to hear
Yeah, I
about
saw
my
you there. Yeah, I saw you on NBS 5.
instead of who is who. I just turned it around and said, "Who are you? Introduce yourself." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Because I'm like, how are you trying to ask who is somebody when we haven't even known you? You know what I
yeah,
mean? So for me, it was always the idea that because I had come from understanding that the beef I was always a part of was to instigate positivity so we could see different perspectives. Even in that light, I was like, these are all young hip hoppers who either will be on or will fade away in the next 3 years. So if
mhm,
you give this relevance, it's just there's no point
right.
in that space. So literally just present them the idea to introduce themselves to the world. Like, tell us
Mhm,
who are you? Tell us
yeah,
about your story. Teach us your journey so we can know that you are headed somewhere we can follow.
yeah,
Instead of you concentrating on asserting yourself when you're still weak, when you're still just learning. You don't know where you're going, but those are just openings. So don't get too excited.
yeah,
Like, just time out. Like, let us know who you are. We're here for you. We're here to
right.
support you. And I think that message needed to get clear. So, thanks to Douglas and Katz for calling me out on MBS
Yeah.
so we could talk about that.
I actually watched the interview, yeah, and I remember it was the same take you gave out of there, like who are you? And it's actually needed to be addressed because everybody was jumping on it, and people you don't know, people coming from all over the place. But yeah, I'm glad you put that straight. So I put out a post on my social medias that I'm gonna host you in my podcast and wanted to see if anybody had questions. And there's a few people that dropped in, brought some questions. And I'm glad we're talking
Mm.
about Uganda's hip hop. And one person was like, can you ask Babaluku where he sees the Ugandan hip hop from 10 years from now? Because I feel like it's fading away.
So there's two perspectives. The rap music could be fading away because rappers are not doing much. And that's the issue that people in Uganda consider the whole hip hop culture rap music. No, rap music is what you enjoy on radio. But in reality, if you came into my world, I'm part of a satellite of young builders in different villages who are community mobilizing and building. So if you ask me about the future of hip hop, I'll definitely have a positive outcome. If you ask me about a rapper's career in Uganda in the next couple, I could also give you a take on that.
Right.
But you have to separate those two to have a good conversation.
Mm.
The rappers, of course, the sphere hasn't improved much because none of them collaborate to raise the industry together. They
Mhm.
work against each other and will work as individuals, which there's no industry that's built by an individual. So until they can come together as a collective, the struggle will always remain and people will always feel like they're fading away. That's just how that is. When it
Right.
comes to the hip culture, of course, within the culture, there's also battles and leaders who have various takes and approaches and philosophies. But the beautiful thing about the truth within the culture, it always unifies. So for those who are unified currently, they are holding huge platforms that are educating, that are teaching, that are inspiring, and that are building communities in different regions in Uganda. So is
Mhm.
the hip hop culture having a bright future in Uganda? Yes, we are going to be very accountable for the future leaders of this country because we have created a platform that inspires others to be community responsible for their communities and also use their gifts as the currency activator to be sustainable, in turn invest in what they want to build in the communities they come from. So, as far as hip hop culture, come on, man, we are here to stay. We
Yeah.
represent an indigenous energy of the land. We are of the land as hip hop culture. This is not something that's alienated from the continent.
Mhm.
We're the people who represent the blueprint, okay, of
Yeah.
where every story of hip hop has come from. How can we not exist? So we are to be here. The character and the value standards that we give rap culture is what people always mistake.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you actually explained that. Like most of us who are not into music, we can accidentally or easily combine rap to hip hop. And I'm glad you separated us for the listeners to know the difference. And like you said, hip hop music is there. It's not just a wave that just comes. It's here to stay, and it's been there for a long time. But I'm still glad that you keep your relationship with other artists. And I'm gonna ask you a question on that. But on your Instagram recently, I saw a picture of you hanging out with Kansime, Shiba, and you had the caption that's the unapologetic gifted women that move masses with their gifts, with Shiba and Kansime. What's the importance of you musicians keeping the relationship together, no matter like they're not doing hip hop, but you have to keep the relationship with other people, even who do different genre of music?
I mean, we're all proud sons and daughters of the land, and we are a defiant generation. We haven't got where we are because people, open doors. Everyone has had to commit to struggle. Our stories come from such messed up backgrounds. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, we've been able to find a niche on how we could present ourselves, become successful, and at the same time, render a gift that, not only celebrates but inspires others. And so anyone who carries that energy, they're a contributor, they're an inspirer, they're showing others that it's possible. You also can do it. So we
Mm-hmm.
cannot not celebrate that. You know what I'm saying? And I think that personally, I live in Rome, but a lot of artists don't want to big up their peers. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like they don't want to hold up space to really say like, yo, actually, yo, wow, like all of those people I know in different way. But I remember when they were not where they are today.
Exactly.
So to see, respect their grind and see that they're still on the front line, they're still championing their causes. I think you cannot not celebrate that when you're mid in a junction, and actually our conversation was actually about that, being able to appreciate each other's stories and really being like, yo, wow, you've lasted this long in what you're
Mhm.
doing, There was a lot of genuine expression towards each other about the work that we all got into.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm glad you talked about that because when you read the caption, like you must have been a cool conversation between those two people, between you guys and your meeting and empowering each other, celebrating each other instead of pulling each other down. And that brings me to, we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, the Bavubuka Nation being the new frontier. I know you started this, and you mentioned you said something really important that we might have skipped, or the listeners might have skipped, but I'm going to bring it back. Like you chose Bavubuka Nation, not Babaluku Foundation, or like you could have made it Self Foundation, but you chose Bavubuka because you saw how they were the same Bavubuka who helped you, and you want to do that to empower others. So how is that being the new frontier, and what are you planning to do with that?
I mean, I think youth are in a position in this country where they're largely marginalized. Bavubuka has been in existence for 15 years,
Mm.
but you could see that we are still encountering the same issues that started 15 years ago when it comes to a national, consensus of what are young people doing in this country. You
Yeah.
are still going to villages and there's no secondary schools. You are still moving into neighborhoods and there's no libraries, there's no theaters. You are still going through communities and there's a lack of vocational learning, skill training, access. So what does that speak for a nation that we come from? you know and I'm not one to always be pointing fingers at the government, because everyone wants to say the government is not doing this, the government is not doing that. I first point a finger to myself. What am I doing? Because that's where it
Exactly.
needs to start. Because you become complacency when all you're doing is blaming and pointing fingers. You know what I'm saying? And so with Bavubuka, we started as Bavubuka the movement before even the
Mhm.
foundation. I always like to tell people we were Bavubuka the movement, and the movement was one that really just was dedicated to ensure that young people will dream, achieve, accomplish, and in turn build community. So we say Bavubuka All Stars because our idea is that every youth was a star in our vision,
Mhm.
and at each youth we touched, the only support we had is to help them polish their star. And
Mhm.
so the harder they polished, the brighter they were shining. That was
And
the analogy of Bavubuka All Stars.
uh-huh.
So really, it's like in the nature of the movement, we embraced everyone as they came. So whether you are into graphic design, whether you are into farming, whether you're into journalism, whether you're into photography, whether you just wanted to rap or you wanted to sing or you wanted to be a farmer or you were a filmmaker, like we made it open that
Yeah.
this Bavubuka energy represented everyone who was creative. And that's a concept I think that has allowed us to really outlast a lot of organization because we were huge on inclusion and collaboration. And without those two things, we would not be in existence.
Mhm. How does the dynasty then comes in, Bavubuka dynasty?
So once you get the Bavubuka Foundation, right, and you have all of these young people from different villages and different towns, everyone bringing a skill, you're realizing that there's money to be made, there's ideas and companies to be developed, there's an envelope, like how do we make money now to sustain the gifts that we have, you know? Or you
Mm.
get a lot of ghetto young people who don't want to rob anymore, but they want to be like, what are the positive ways to generate income? So the dynasty came in as the entrepreneurship arm because it
Mhm.
went from outreach to like, well, now we really need to work, guys. Like we need to be making money so we could be able to support our, our careers that were not acknowledged by the outside world, but now we need to find a way to make money so we could build space for them to be appreciated.
Right.
So the dynasty came in as the arm of entrepreneurship to inspire people to think about building companies, building their own ideas. So matter of fact, if you came up with Bavubuka in the dynasty era, everyone had their own company set up. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh yeah, so what's your company, man? And that's how young people would talk around each other, finding who would fit in their company to build model ideas or be able to write little like grant like or proposal opportunities. But they
Mhm.
were equipping each other with the possibility of dreaming and learning together while they try new things. So
Yeah.
the dynasty was able to kind of seed that energy, think about sustainability and how you can use your gift to literally finance what you want to do.
That's a good project that you're doing, and I really wanted. This is the gist of the podcast where I wanted to touch on because it's really helping a lot of youth. And I know last year, 13th December, you had the moving beyond the music that you did for the youth. Where you had you mentioned about this when you're talking about the Bavubuka, where you had poets, dancers, artists, farmers, all but everybody to come together, and it's helping like to grow the community. That's the word you use earlier, community. And that's the one thing I love about Uganda. It's a community. We work together. And no offense to the US, even if I live here, but that's something I studied in school, that the US is individualistic. Most of the people here, it's like, this is my property, this is my land, this is my car. But like back home, it's a community. This is ours, this is us. And but I wanted to, are you planning to do something like that? The one you did, moving beyond the music, where you have youth around. Are you planning to do something like that this year too?
Yeah, all those things happen annually.
Okay.
And sometimes they can happen more than once a year, depending on what kind of professional access I get and that I invite to the continent. Like
Mm.
Moving Beyond the Music is a program dedicated to get a space where they convene together and have raw, intimate sessions where they can directly exchange information, knowledge, create and build together an experience that's
Mhm.
learning, empowering, and transforming at the same time. So I think for me, those are things that I do to ensure that young people in Uganda don't lose hope. You
Exactly.
know, a lot of young people think that they cannot reach out to the professionals, intimidated by going into the private sector or approaching the corporate sector. So if
Mm.
I have friends in the corporate sector who are humble enough and have the value of community building, I try to create convenings where I could bring them closer to the young people. And so
Mhm.
that's why we say moving beyond the music. Like we know what the music does, but what happens beyond that?
Right.
So it's just putting us above what restricts us and
Mm.
opens us to real conversations of how we could change what is impacting us.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that, and it's always nice to sit down and talk with you and just learn, pick from your knowledge, and the listeners. I should be like, I'm glad we were able to do this because I can't wait for other youth to tap into this, to hear these testimonies, to hear what you're planning to do, and to hear how you helping them. But I want to end with a few questions and then this statement, which I want you to talk about more because it was also from your Instagram. Spread love, be love, give love, let love, pray love. That stuck out to me when I saw when I saw it on your Instagram. What does speak out to you when you wrote that?
I mean, just put it like this. My father died when I was 14 years old. And I think the only reason I'm able to share everything with one of the biggest things that I was always afraid of, and that's love. And when you realize that people leave you, when you're traumatized by people leaving you, you tend to create this place of disappointment in within yourself that everyone leaves. So then it makes it hard for you to be able to appreciate yourself or be consistent or even show up. And
Right.
so we need to allow, people, not even to allow, to encourage is the word. We need to encourage that memory
Yeah.
and support others to know in case they have forgotten, that foundation
Yeah.
centers all our healing wherever, no matter what we're going through. When we center ourselves from
Hmm.
that place, we're able to find clarity, we're able to build, we're able to connect, and then we're able to share.
That is good, and I wanted to end with that because that's a punchline, and I wanted everybody at least to get something out of this conversation. And there's no better way to end it with love and love one another, support one another, give love, pray love, and all that. But before I let you go, I want to ask you these three questions that I ask the guests I have on the podcast. What has been a life lesson you've learned in life to this point?
The power of reconnection. Now, when I say the power of reconnection, is I did share on this podcast that I left Uganda at the age of 12. My father died when I was 14. I grew up in the diaspora. And so my story is kind of different than a lot of young people in Uganda. But I do have similar peers in the same storyline and struggle. But I have to say that if I never chose to return home to reconnect, this me you're hearing would never exist.
Hmm.
And so I have come to honor the highest respect and value for my ancestors, those who came before me, who lived a story and a lifeline that continuously reminds me of the greatness within myself that caused me to remember to return home. Not only to
Right.
return home, but to tap into the infinite blessings that they left for me to enjoy, not only enjoy by myself, but to create as an inspiration of service so others could find joy. And so my powerful
Hmm.
lesson in life has been the power of reconnection, reconnection of self, reconnection to memory, remember to remember, and re allowing yourself to literally claim life in its whole nature that has been gifted, not only in compartments and fragments that most of us live it in. You know what I mean? I want to die living. I don't want to die in
Right.
any struggle. I was not
Hmm.
birthed here to be a part of any struggle. That's human nature construct. I want to die
Right.
living just like a tree fades away and it sheds into its decay.
Hmm.
Now it will beautifully live a long life if human beings were not interfering to, you know, cut it down to go and get this currency that they're focused on. Money is the rule of all
Right.
evil as much as people miss access for everything. No, that's a trick. It's the worst magic that they invented,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying, to destroy you. But at the same time,
Hmm.
because it's systemic, connection for me has given me the understanding to know that I might never know it all. But the idea that
Yeah.
I move towards regaining myself back, regaining my memory back, and claiming that dignity
Hmm.
for myself, and claiming that honor for myself, it will allow me to have lived a full life and celebrate those who've journeyed with me in a way that my spirit would still be here when I'm dead and gone.
Yeah, that's a really impactful life lesson, and I'm sure somebody who can understand or who can listen will be able to pick out something that you've just talked about today. And then I'll end this podcast with a signature question that I ask everybody. Who would you like to see on my podcast next? And you're gonna help me bring that person to the podcast or connect me to that person so they can be our next guest on it this podcast. I don't have a specific field where I host anybody, everybody, anybody who's willing to share a story that I think is going to impact another person's life, and that's my focus on the podcast. So it could be anybody that you want to recommend.
All right. So I have a young brother in the UK. He reached out to me because he wanted to talk to someone who really had also experienced Bavubuka and for the success story. He's an engineer today. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? He's high up in construction and doing great. But he reached out. It's like, "Ah, why don't you just get some people who've experienced Bavubuka to be in a conversation, you know?" So I think
Mhm.
I'm going to nominate that brother. And I have another brother. I'll double it up. Ram MC.
Yeah.
Is a young brother I've known since he was 12 years old, but is one of the most influential young leaders in the East. You know what I mean? And so it would be nice to tap into like his journey, and he's just became a
Mhm.
father too, right? So
Right.
it's like, young youth becoming, tapping into fatherhood,
Yeah.
being responsible for community, and having his dreams and aspiration of collective, consciousness. Yeah.
It was a good time chatting with you and talking to you. Honestly, when time allows, I would really love to have you back on here, and we just continue to talk and impact. I want to hear these stories. I want my other youth, and that's the goal why I started this podcast. And if you listen to all the stories of people I've hosted on here, it's not about me. It's about people sharing their stories to impact another person's life. I always like the line, like we rise by lifting each other up, and that's something you mentioned while we're talking, like the Bavubuka that helped you, and now you're helping this Bavubuka, and this Bavubuka going to help another generation, and it's just going to keep going
Exactly.
like that. So, and that's why I want to use this field where I'm at and learning from the things you're doing to also add on to what you're doing in my own path and help other people like that.
But congratulations on your life career. You know what
Thank
I'm
you, sir.
saying?
Thank you, sir.
Also, congratulations on this platform. And congratulations on being an award winning podcast.
Yes,
Okay, I
sir.
saw that. Yes, congratulations. You know, that means there's goodness in the space, and many people will definitely enjoy the stories you've been able to engage with them as points of inspiration. And man, like keep doing the good work. It doesn't matter. This is my feeling always. It doesn't matter where we're situated on the planet. The
Mhm.
idea that we could turn into a conversation that honors ourselves, our journey, and our story always anchors us back in the spirit in which we build.
Exactly.
So keep building, keep connecting, you know what I mean? Always remember, celebrate life, you know what I mean? And let's
Yeah.
continue, let's continue because we the venue.
Yes, sir. All right, Baba Luku, thank you very much, and God bless you.
Bless you.
Hey there, this is Bonnie Kibuka, the host of the Ugandan Boy Talk Show. Thanks for watching and listening to my podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it with a friend and recommend somebody to this podcast. Don't forget to leave a feedback on this podcast because that's how we grow. And also don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. Join us on our social media platforms on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So we would love to hear from you. Thank you very much and be blessed.